Welcome to another episode of Journeys of Hope. Today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Richard Pryor. Nope, not the one that some of you may have grown up with, but one who probably knows more and has helped more people when it comes to grief and loss. So welcome, Richard.
It's a pleasure.
Well, we're looking forward to having you on the cruise, and this will be your first cruise with us. And you lost your son Richie 4 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about Richie? If I had met Richie, what would I have remembered about him? Tell me a little bit about him.
Oh, if you met Richie, you would never forget him. He lit up the room. You know, he loved to laugh, loved to be silly, didn't take life too seriously, loved to travel, just had a beautiful heart. He was an angel. But I never knew he was an angel. You know, I never realized that.
Only after he died, you came to kind of see that about him.
Yes, and he was a teacher too. He taught me so many lessons that, you know, that I needed to learn about life.
Well, I think that's really an interesting observation, because I would say the same thing of, my son died when he was 4.5, and I think the same thing is very true. When he was alive, I didn't realize that he was actually my teacher and that he was actually raising me. And it was only really afterwards that I came to see that. And it sounds like maybe you've come to kind of that same understanding with you and your son, Richie.
I get goosebumps. Yes, so true, so true. You know, Glenn, I'm so grateful that I had, 27 years with him. There's so much gratitude flowing through me. Now, it took me a while to come to that conclusion, though. You know, the first couple of years of the grief were just horrible, as you know.
Yeah, well, you are kind of in a different place, and maybe you could talk to people and help people understand how the man we're seeing in front of us, the man who seems so alive and full of energy, talk to us about how that man came to be after your son Richie died.
I created this guy. This wasn't who I was, 4 years ago. Before Richie passed, life was perfect for us. We had the perfect family. And then we got that call. My younger son, Matthew, found Richie, passed away in his house. He passed away in his sleep. And, I went through, it was a tough road, as you know. It's a year and a half of self-pity, just sadness, depression, anger, all the symptoms of guilt, of grief. And it took me a long time. And I don't know when I hit bottom, but I went to a seminar, and the guy at the seminar was talking about focus and meaning. And at that point, my focus was the past, the loss, pity, resentment, guilt, all that stuff. That's what I was focusing on. And I was miserable, and I was unhappy, and I just didn't know how to get out of my own way. And then the meaning was why? Why us? Why Richie? Why me? Why God? Why not somebody else? That's what I kind of, was doing to myself, that was keeping me in that, frozen state, of not wanting to get better. So I started changing. I started doing things that was against my rules, like going to seminars and professional development, because I never believed in that stuff. I read books 20 years ago about, how to become rich quick and stuff, but that stuff didn't work. So I just started breaking my rules. I started reading more about religion, about life after death, because I wanted to know where my son went. I was curious, and I wanted to know why. And, through this journey, I kind of figured out that I'll never figure out why. So I had to start asking myself better questions about, the life situation I was in, the challenge and the grief and my loss. And I started asking myself questions like, what am I supposed to learn from this? Who is this calling me to become? Who am I supposed to be? I believe in life after death. I believe I'll connect with my son down the line, and, we'll be together forever. But there's two conversations I can have with him. The first conversation is, Dad, you didn't get it. You didn't get the meaning of all this. You wasted your life away being sad and depressed. You affected all the people around you. You affected Mom, my brother Matt, my other son Matt. And, you just wasted your life away. The second conversation is, Dad, you picked ass. You got the meaning. You went out, you found the meaning of what I was trying to tell you and put you on this path. And now you're helping so many people. I'm so proud of you and I love you.
Well, I think that that word you use there is a very powerful one, because I believe that ultimately finding the meaning is where we find kind of that, I'm not sure the right term, almost like the resolution of the fact that we have this loss, and the loss is always going to be part of us.
Mm-hmm.
But yet at the same time, we're still here. We didn't die. And so we have a purpose, and to find that purpose, that meaning, and to, to come to that. And you say, it was a year and a half of time, but, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with taking the time that people need to get there when they're ready, and, when the time is right. That's when they'll make that choice. And, it has to hit them there.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned, obviously, that as a man, and you talk about men, and this, you're obviously somewhat familiar with male grief because you've lived it. But if you were talking to men, what would you say to them in terms of how do men kind of reconcile what society says versus their own grief journey? And what advice would you give to a man who might be in that place where he hasn't come to see how to do that yet?
You got to get help. You got to ask for help. I mean, there were 4 things. People told me I'd get over it like a cold, that I could fix it. So I was trying to fix everybody. I was trying to fix my wife. And the only way to fix it would bring my son back. Be strong. It's like we were raised and brought up to be strong. You'd fall down and your father would say, get up, brush yourself off and get back in there. And then, you don't need any help because, us guys, I don't ask for directions. I'll be lost for 2 hours driving and my wife will say, you should ask for directions. Like, nope, I'm going to find my way there. Even if we're 6 days late for this wedding, I'm going to find my way there. So those are some of the things. And it's just, it's saying it's okay to get help from somebody and not having to be this strong person, because that strength that we were supposed to, everybody's, puts on us, we carry that around, and the grief is really heavy. And by going to ask for help and telling people that you're having a bad day, it's okay, because it lessens the load. And that's one thing I try to tell men, that you got to talk to people.
You wrote a book, correct?
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what that book is and kind of who is it for, and what is it? What's the brief message about it?
Okay, the book is here. I always have it handy. Warriors of Life. So the book came about because, as I was going on my journey of grief, because we all have our own journeys, however long it takes, and it just, when I was going on it, I couldn't find anybody to help me. We ended up, we did a Compassionate Friends group meeting, and I walked into there and I saw people there that were in there for 18 years, and I couldn't relate to it because my grief was only 1 month old. I says, I can't imagine me being here at a meeting like this in 18 years from now. So I was kind of all messed up in my mind. And then we finally got a meeting with the hospice with other parents that lost children. And that's when I really connected. But after 8 weeks, I was done. We were done. It was like my wife and I go, now what do we do? So I started reading, like I told you earlier, I started reading and breaking all the rules that I had about life and, doing seminars and stuff. And I started reading, and I read these amazing books. I have them around here somewhere. I'm supposed to send emails to all the authors and thank them. And what all the books were lacking was a book that gave me kind of a guideline. So my book is like a workbook. I take you on my journey from start. It's Warriors of Life, Conquering Grief and Battling Your Way Back to Happiness. So I take you on day 1 when we have our loss until, I finish the book, but I'm still growing. So the book is made to be as a guideline and a workbook to take people through each stage of my journey and what I did to, conquer society telling me that I had to be strong and people telling me that I had to get over it. And the triggers, that trigger those emotions and grief that come up over you when you don't even expect it. So that's kind of what the book is all about, because I wanted to put something out there that's going to help the person I was when I first lost Richie.
And that's Warriors of Life. And if somebody wanted to get that, where could they get it? TheWarriorsOfLife.com. THE warriorsoflife.com. Okay, great. Now, when you're on the cruise, you're going to be, you're going to be teaching kind of, you just talked about the fact that the book has kind of a, for lack of a better term, a roadmap, a guidebook, kind of a step-by-step guide. Then you're going to be teaching some of that on the cruise. If somebody comes on the cruise and they're in your thing, what would they, obviously there's books going to have a lot more into it, but what would they expect to walk away from after coming to your presentation? What would they be left with?
Hopefully they're going to pick up, like I say, at least one thing. I'm hoping to take away at least one thing, and it's, there's hope. So everything goes back to hope. So finding something in the workshop, what I'm going to teach, that gives them hope to move them forward through the grief. Because sometimes grief, it's, people talk about butterflies and rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes, most of the time, grief is not that easy. Sometimes it's hard to push through it because we're scared of what's on the other side of that. I was scared. That's why I was staying stuck, because I didn't know what was on the other side of that. The other side I thought was, thinking about Richie, I'll never see his children, I'll never see him get married. So that's what I'm hoping people take out of that, just a learning and understanding more about their own personal journey of grief and what they can do to help them, in their own way.
Well, I love your concept there with the warrior, because what I think of as a warrior is not being afraid. I mean, a warrior can be a very scary situation. You're going into a place where it can be the unknown and it can be dangerous and it can be fearful, but it's going forward anyway. It's being willing to say, I may be afraid and I may not know what's going to happen, but I trust that I have the skills that I need, and I trust that I can fight my way through this. And I like that kind of metaphor that you have there. I think that's a really good one for someone who is on this grief journey.
Yeah, because that's what I felt like, Glenn. I just felt like, I was beaten down so much, after the loss of Richie. It's like I had to rise up. I had to change. I had to, create this person, this one that talks to other people and that's upfront about it, and it's spreading the word of hope and, moving forward through the grief. Years ago, I wouldn't have done that. Years ago, I was in the back. I would never do this what we're doing now. This is against my rules. I feel so alive now than I felt my whole life.
Absolutely. That I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Collateral Beauty?
I think I saw it. Yes.
Yeah, you might find it interesting, because what it does is it talks a lot about what you're talking about here. Are these the pieces of us that sometimes it's hard to reconcile, because I think sometimes people can feel guilty. They can feel kind of like I don't want these things, but the fact is we weren't given that choice. No one asked you, do you want Richie to die? That was not a question you asked. You didn't get a vote. That happened. But then you had choices as to what you chose to do with it after that fact occurred. Mm-hmm. And that's important. And it sounds like you've done a lot of really great things with that. So
yeah, it's hard it's hard in the beginning. It's so when I see people that have recent losses, the way I coach is like, they may not be ready for this because they have a huge journey ahead of them. And sometimes you're not ready for this, like in your face. We gotta do the work we need to do to get on the other side where, we're at peace with the loss and we're moving forward. Because like you said, we're still here. We still have work to do. There's a purpose for us being here.
So let me just kind of dig a little bit into what you just said there, though, because, your concept of a warrior can be somewhat intimidating, because if someone had suggested that to you at that 1 month period when you first walked into that capacity, yeah, you wouldn't ready to hear that.
Yeah, no.
So what do you say to someone who's, kind of they're listening to this and they're hearing what you're saying, and what's going through your mind is, I'm glad that worked for him, but yeah, it's not going to work for me.
I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm just here to tell them, like, people always told me, time heals all wounds, and it's scarred. You get scarred over, but it takes time, and some people aren't ready for it. It's just, you got to keep doing things. What I tell people is, you just got to keep doing some different things along your journey. You can't stay stuck. You can't be stuck in that grief, because I've seen people, and I do a lot of work in prisons and sober houses. And I talked to a mom last week, She lost her son 17 years ago, Glenn. And the reason she is in the sober house is because she became an alcoholic because she never dealt with it. She just let that grief consume her life. And that's what I'm here to tell people, that you got to do whatever it takes. You know, we had this loss, and I don't know, God says he only gives you things you can handle, or whatever that saying is, but in some respect, I believe that.
So let me ask you then, you know, because at first glance, it sounds like maybe your life is kind of all butterflies and you know, rainbows at this point. But you know, talk to me about you know, is that true, or are there times when you still get, you know, knocked on your butt?
I knocked on my butt this morning. I was driving down. I did a group in prison this morning, and I was rehearsing my workshop for St. Louis for Friday. And I got to the point where I was talking about Richie, and I got a little overwhelmed. And, you know, when I get to that point, you know, men in grief, but I have moments of grief. I was in grief for 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and I don't want to go back there ever again. So when I have that moment of grief, I just think about how wonderful and grateful I am that I had Richie. I got this amazing angel watching my back constantly. And then I ask myself, when I'm either crying or emotional, ask myself is like, what would Richie want from me in this moment? I know he'd want me to smile, laugh, and be happy. And that's what I think about. And that's what keeps me going every day. That's what gets my feet to get from the bed to the floor and to move.
Absolutely. Gives you that skill set to know that when you do get knocked down, it's not like that first 1.5 years when you had no clue that you would ever stand again. Now you know you will. You might have just got hit, but you know you're gonna take the 8 count. You stand up, you look at it, and then you're ready to go again, and you're ready to make it happen.
That is life. That's what life is. Nobody ever told us life would be easy. Certainly, my parents didn't. You know, they didn't say it was going to be easy, and so from this point on, you know, suffering this loss, there's nothing else anybody could do to me in my life that's going to compare to that. So I pretty much, you know, I'm like kind of coasting, but I'm doing it with a purpose.
Absolutely. Now, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, that thewarriorsoflife.com is the best place to get in touch with you?
Yep, all my stuff is there. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to you having on the cruise, and I'm sure that other people will too.
So excited. We're gonna have a blast. It's gonna be great, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.